at least in the 1940s incarnation, evangelicalism, born out of fundamentalism, trying to defeat hardline fundamentalism on the one side, moderate or mainline liberalism on the other side, believing itself to be the truest Christian way. And so, but I have argued that evangelicalism never really leaves fundamentalism behind in its tactics. Do you make a conclusion like that in your book?
So yeah, in some ways, and this is this happens a bit in some of this stuff got cut, and it may end up in another book because some of the particular theology debate, the in the weeds debates over what evangelical theology counts as in and out versus fundamentalism and so on. Some of that didn't quite make it in, but there is some discussion of that around, in particular, how the walls get set up and the gatekeeping, right? The Evangelical Theological Society is a great example. The Evangelical Theological Society becomes the clearinghouse gatekeeping institution that says to be an officially recognized evangelical theologian, one rubric is those who are members of the Evangelical Theological Society. The only criteria, they have one criteria in the Evangelical Theological Society statement of faith that has never changed, and it's inerrancy. Yeah. And the inerrancy debates are another one of those evangelical debates that happens, every 10 years. And there's debates over whether evangelicalism can be broader than just subscription to inerrancy, right? The idea for we're using technical theological language there. Inerrancy being the idea that the Bible is without error in down to the commas and things like that. And something that I think I end up talking about this a bit in the book. One of the problems, though, with that is evangelicalism, in the way that we are describing, never settled the problem of what to do about divergent interpretations of an inerrant Bible,
right?
Such that you could get two folks who say, yes, I believe in the authority or inerrancy or infallibility, if slightly softened, of Scripture, and yet I interpret this passage differently than these folks. And because there was no way to settle that, it gets in evangelical circles, it gets settled often via power struggles, right? Whoever can marginalize their opponents in those divergent interpretations carries the day for evangelical interpretation, such that the egalitarian, complementarian, the gender debates over that kind of stuff would be a good example of this. It's a few passages, right, that are the crux of in the Bible, that are a crux of these debates over gender egalitarianism, and you get folks on opposite sides saying, yes, we affirm the authority of Scripture. We just interpret these few selections in Pauline letters slightly differently than those folks, and one might be able to imagine a coexistence between some of those folks in a movement, right? That could say, we differ on this, and yet we will find common cause as members of the evangelical movement. And it just has never worked that way.
Yeah. As we wrap up, Isaac, I want to ask you two questions. Disciplinarily, I know you went to Union to get a PhD in Christian ethics. This appears to be a work of history. Could you talk about the disciplinary perspective of the book, and do you end up having a moral agenda, an ethical agenda coming out of this project?
This is a fun question. Coming from the perspective of what are you doing out here, my former current mentee. So this is something I've thought a lot about. So I think I'll try to answer this in a couple of different ways. One of which is, and I think I have talked to you about this before, I think that and this would be even zooming out from just evangelical or Christian circles in the U.S. Across the current U.S. American context, I think some of our most important ethical work is being done by historians. Truthfully, I think that I'm not one who takes takes a view that what historians are doing is necessarily some sort of purely objective kind of thing, right? That it is just like, oh yeah, this view from nowhere idea that the scholar is completely always the disinterested observer. You aim for objectivity in certain kinds of scholarly work and you try your best at it, but I've never worked on the presupposition that that's ever purely possible, right? And the stories that we tell about ourselves, whether it be as a nation, as a religious movement, particularly about our history, matter in terms of how there is moral import, from my perspective, to the stories, the kinds of stories we tell. You see it, I would say, at the national level on our willingness to reckon with the ongoing legacies of systemic racism in this country, right? This is something that that historians can help with. Another thing that is another interesting way maybe to answer that question is that to draw on the work of another of my mentor, Gary Dorian, on what social ethics is, Christian social ethics, what it is and does, right? It's a discipline that is aimed at transforming the structures of society in the direction of justice. And it's an interdisciplinary project. The project of social ethics has always been this interdisciplinary thing where you have some ethicists who are more philosophical, some more theological, some who do historical work. And a couple of my mentors have done some historical work themselves, present company included, and Gary Dorian as well, who does some of this recovery of moral traditions that are being left behind. And I think dissent, it can be a very powerful moral witness. And in the story of evangelicalism across, the years that we have known each other and worked together, I have seen these stories of dissent that, whether my personal agreement with any of them, I see bravery and courage and faithfulness among folks who got written out of histories, and in some way hoped to do a little bit of justice to some of these folks who were underdogs, who fought for a different way to be evangelical. I think most of them ended up losing that struggle, but the book, one thing I hope the book does is honor their stories.
It does, Isaac. And as I said earlier, the fact that I knew some of these people and I saw their wounds, and the tragic dimension of people who wanted to be considered evangelicals and were pushed out and they loved Jesus deeply, and they were told, that's not good enough. Your politics isn't right. So history is morally laden work. And I am thrilled to see already that people are seeing the deep significance of your book. And I look forward to seeing it ricochet all around. It's part of a dissenting literature itself. In a sense, I think your book about dissent is an expression of dissent. And I honor you, and I honor those that you are writing about. And I'm grateful to Erdman's for publishing the book and for this opportunity to speak with you today.